What's up? It's Damon Burton, president of SEO National, and I want to say thanks to Girish for inviting me on the Back2Basics podcast. If you haven't done so already, drop him a like, drop him a share, subscribe to his podcast. He spends a lot of time reaching out and contacting people like myself and other great guests and entertaining them and asking them good questions to provide you more value. Remember, keep it simple as we talked about. Everything goes back to the basics.
Hi folks, my name is Girish, Bali, the host for Back to Basics, another Back to Basics for another week. Today we're going to be talking about SEO, Service Engine Optimization. Yes, it's a very big word and big sentences, but if you really think about it, this is what it drives. This is what the analytics looks at and what it does and what it does not do. We're going to talk about that today with a guest of mine, amazing person. I've listened to him in many different platforms and what he has done and what he's doing right now. His name is Damon, and we are just going to go and chit chat about SEO and what is SEO stands for and why do we need this? Is it still valid in today's world? So let's talk about that. So Damon, how are you? And thanks for coming to Back to Basics.
Hey, thanks for having me, Girish. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. So before we get into the basics of SEO and your company and your book also, what does Back to Basic mean to you?
Well, for me, I like to simplify everything. And we all know the importance of documented processes, but sometimes we overcomplicate them. So I like to find the right balance of creating scalable processes, but in simplistic ways.
Yeah. So thank you again. And when I asked this question on the website, when you came on the calendar, the answer that I got was simplicity is the answer.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's the way we rumble on this show. So thank you again for coming.
Yeah.
You know, first of all, before we get into the details of what you do and what the whole market is all about, what does SEO mean to regular people if they don't know? So can you explain that if you don't mind in your own terms?
Yeah, so it stands for search engine optimization. And what that means is basically showing up higher on search engines for words you can monetize, but without paying for ads. So that's the easy way to explain it.
Yeah. So thank you again for that. How easy is it to monetize when it comes to SEO? Let's put it that way.
That's a good question. As you said that, I'm surprised I haven't got asked that more often. So it really kind of depends on what industry you're in, because service-based industries and B2B tend to have higher profit margins or can be more flexible in their pricing. The few times that I tend to decline an SEO engagement is usually more on the retail side, and it's not retail in general. It's very specifically what your profit margins are, because let's just average things out, and let's say you're paying $3,000 a month for SEO, and if you sell a widget and your profit margin is 99 cents, that's a lot of widgets that you have to sell to offset the cost of SEO just to break even, and then even more to make a profit. So it really just kind of depends on your profit margins is where. I think just about any product, service, or industry, they can benefit from SEO, but maybe a different way to phrase it is, when do you prioritize it? So like in that retail example, I'd probably spend money on paid ads and reputation management, building up other things and credibility first, which would then make it easier to monetize those smaller profit margins with SEO.
Yeah. So thank you again for that. There are places like Pinterest and there's things like Google and everything else, right? What do they look for? Do they look for naming conventions? Do they look for tags, keywords? What are they actually looking for? What are your thoughts on that? And is there a right keywords to look at?
Well, it's all over the place. And, my area of expertise is more on the side of Google, but I know enough about the other platforms that I get at least out a little commentary, but I couldn't deep dive on it. But, with Google, it's not tags. And in fact, a lot of the things that people that are kind of stuck in outdated processes with SEO, tags can often do more harm than good. So like one example is a tag called meta keywords. So meta keywords, you don't see them on the website, they're on the back end. And search engines used to use them to say, what is this website about? What is this page about? What is this product about? And that was the opportunity for you as a webmaster to just cram in an infinite amount of keywords, whether they were relevant or not. So of course, marketers abuse that, and then Google devalues it, and they've devalued that so much to the point that I found documented references as far back as 2009 that they don't even use it anymore.
Mm,
And so tags are completely worthless, at least in this example for SEO. But
mm,
then you look at tags in other places like Instagram, and Pinterest and YouTube, and they do have value. Now, they may not be forward facing where they're necessarily tags that, maybe on Instagram people engage with tags, but maybe less so on YouTube. But it doesn't mean that they don't use them. Like Amazon's a good example too. I
mm,
don't know a lot about, I don't know as much about Amazon as I do about like Google, but some of our clients are Amazon agencies. And so through working with them by proxy,
mm,
we better understand that tags serve a lot of value on Amazon. So it really just kind of depends on the platform, and it changes too. Like we
mm,
used to, I get a lot of exposure on LinkedIn where you and I met, and tags used to be awesome,
mm,
maybe 18 months ago. And
mm,
then I started noticing engagement from ideal leads decreasing on the posts that had tags. And so
mm.
I said, well, am I sure about that? Let's test a few without tags and just instantly regain that exposure that had been lost. So it'll vary. I mean, you got to kind of pay attention as things evolve.
Yeah, yeah. So thank you again, Damon, for that. You know, you're running this company called SEO National, okay?
Mhm.
And if I'm not mistaken, you started this in 2007.
Correct.
Before that, you were a developer. So what is the thought process from a developer to running a SEO company? I mean,
Hmm.
they're two poles apart, right? So what are your thoughts on that?
So my superpower, this is a great topic because my superpower is bridging that gap.
Mm,
So like on the designer developer side, and you can even split design and development too, because designers can make things that look really pretty, but they
mm,
may not be able to develop them. And developers can create amazing operational machines, but they might not be able to make it look pretty.
mm,
And so they need somebody to translate in between. But
mm,
then those people need somebody to translate in between the customer. And then somebody needs to translate the customer between themselves. And what I
mm,
mean by that is the customer may say, I really want A, but as you gain experience and you can translate what they're saying about A, you know that they'd be better with B. And so then you have to be able to communicate to that customer and say, well, A is a great idea, but B is where the magic happens. And then they go, okay, yay. And now how do we make that happen? Then you have to take what you had a conversation with the customer and translate that back to your team and say, hey, here's what the customer said. Here's the design we're going for. And you can explain that to the designers, but then you might have to have a different conversation with the developers and say, it's going to look like this, but here's how it needs to function when they click on that thing within that design.
mm,
So for me, it's been, that's where I spend most of my time nowadays is focusing on growing the relationships and then kind of steering the ship, right? But then the team does the majority of the production. Now, how that transition happened, maybe that's kind of what you're asking also,
mhm,
is my as the team grew, you get the freedom as a business owner to better pick and choose which things that you're more confident in or where you'd rather spend your time and where your superpowers are. So
mm.
for me, I've just kind of groomed that over the years to focus on where I can have the biggest impact, either usually in a combination of the biggest impact for the customer and then also the biggest impact on how I can value my time.
Mm. Yeah, Damon, thank you again. I want to guide people if that's okay with you. So, if I need to get into a SEO company like, let's say, yours, what do they need to do in order to develop? I mean, do they need to be a developer to know SEO,
Mm.
or do they need to know the science of SEO and tags, or what other classes do you think that they should be looking into?
I don't know about other people, but for me, it's more about like a willingness to learn. And I've found that not hiring SEO experienced people is better, because what happens when I hire people that have an extensive history in SEO is they have to break their bad habits
Hmm,
and then retrain them. So
hmm,
for me, it's all about willingness to learn and flexibility in adopting to the culture, right? So if there's so much value in me and the culture that we've built. In the 15 years I've had the agency, I've never had anybody quit. I mean, I've had to let some people go on my own choice, but I've never had anybody come to me and say, hey, I'm going to move on.
hmm,
And that's because of the great environment that we built. And that's really valuable to me. So I do a lot to protect that.
Hmm.
And so for me, it's about a willingness to grow with the company. I don't know if that answers it.
Yeah, it does. But from a technical point of view, is there some courses that they need to take? For example, I don't know, SQL that I need to take because I need to
Mm.
learn database, or a little programming to understand the script writing, or maybe automation. What are your thoughts on that part?
My team's kind of split in thirds. It's, a third are designers and developers, a third are copywriters, and a third are miscellaneous admins and researchers and data analysts.
Mm,
Um, we have three that are dedicated purely to programming and
mm,
coding, and the where the magic is understanding how the puzzle pieces come together,
mm,
because I can find a million programmers, but I can't find a million programmers that care about where we're going or care
mm,
about where the customer is going. So I
mm,
mean, if I had to give the short answer of skill sets, um, for us, we do a ton in WordPress, and
mm,
so WordPress development is nice to have a familiarity with, understanding how child themes work in WordPress,
mm,
understanding how to customize plugins and integrate them with third-party things, particularly tracking and analytics.
mm,
So a lot of what we do is we don't really reinvent the wheel. I mean, the bigger chunk of our stuff is on optimization, not necessarily custom development.
mm.
So having a flexibility and understanding how all the pieces connect is probably more of my bigger interest than
Yeah.
like a rock or PHP developer or something like
Of
that.
course, of course, of course. Thank you so much, Damon, for that. Let's say if almost every company that I know has a website. Okay, now how do they update their SEO? I mean, obviously they'll contact their own, domain company, or their website company, hosting company. But as a owner of that website, what do I need to look for, and how do I make that decision? What are your thoughts
Yeah.
on that part?
So that's a great question. So I'll give a couple answers, and then if you want to go really deep, I've actually written at least two off the top of my head, two
Yes,
pieces on
please,
this.
please.
If you just go search Damon Burton Forbes, you'll
Mhm.
you'll see kind of like my archive of posts, and I have multiple. I have off the top of my head, I have two posts about SEO myths. I have another post called "Four SEO Red Flags to Watch Out For" when you're shopping for an SEO agency, and then the other one is something about 9 things to look for. I can't remember the specifics of it. It
Mhm.
was about a year ago. But so I've written a ton on there if you want to go search that. But for this conversation, what comes to mind is the biggest thing is transparency. So you don't need to know about all the tiny details that the agency is doing, but they better be good at being able to articulate to you what the processes are. Now, you don't have to necessarily remember all those things, but they better be able to come to you and explain. For me, I've distilled SEO down to 3 pillars. So the first pillar is uh, content, your website structure. So does it load quickly? Is it mobile friendly? Is it easy to use? So they better be able to communicate to you like, hey, we found these opportunities on your website in areas that are broken or could be improved. Now, the second pillar in SEO is content. You have to have some sort of content strategy. So they should be able to articulate to you, A, what are they going to do with the existing content? How are they going to update it? And B, what are they going to do? How are they going to create an ongoing content strategy?
Hmm.
Now, the third pillar in SEO is credibility. So they have to be able to clarify how they're going to build up the brand awareness around your website.
Hmm.
Now, you only need 2 out of those 3 pillars to get a return on your investment with SEO. But if you get 3 out of 3, that's usually when you dominate.
Hmm.
So you want to watch out for the smoke and mirrors or the vague answers. And the word that drives you crazy is proprietary. If anybody tells you they have a proprietary system, chances are they're full of crap,
Hmm.
because all of us use the same tools. We just use them differently. So
Hmm.
the chance of somebody actually having a proprietary system is highly unlikely.
Hmm. When thank you so much, Damon, for that. Let's say if I contact an agency to help me, I guess, advertise my website, or my company, and they say, you know what, your whole website SEO is totally wrong because I get a whole bunch of errors. What does that mean? Does that mean that it's not pulled in different search engines, or does it mean that my design is very, like, off? What are your thoughts on that part?
It could be any of the above. I mean, the first thing that comes to mind for me is what platform does it run on? So an
Mm,
example is, there's like free builders like Wix and Weebly, and I think GoDaddy even has a free builder. Now, those builders serve a purpose of allowing the small business owner to get in and create a website quickly and for free.
mm,
But you run into a limitation when you start marketing websites that are built on those platforms, because those platforms are all inclusive to that provider. So
mm,
you can only optimize what they give you access to touch and feel.
mm,
That's why WordPress is so popular in the world of SEO, because you own the installation and you can touch and feel every part of it. You can edit every file. If you get into the technical updates and coding changes, you have access to change code files. So it could be that. It could be the design. The way that we look at new sites look at sites from new leads is, I'm like the anti-sales guy. I don't want to come in and be like, "Hey, thanks, you just signed up for SEO. Now we're also going to charge you another 10 or 20 or $50,000 for a website." So I always try to salvage it when we can. Now, there's kind of like a couple different scenarios that come to mind. Ideally, you salvage it if the design is good and the structure is decent, but you run an SEO audit and there's a couple broken things, just fix those things.
mm,
If the design sucks, but the content's good, then hopefully it's built on a good platform that you can just reskin it, reverse engineer a new design into the existing content.
mm,
There are some times when everything sucks and you have to rebuild it from the ground up. But I try to communicate that in advance, and I try to communicate why. So it's usually there's something salvageable. The biggest dead end is when it's on a platform that's just not scalable. And so what we do in that case is, we have a great example of, there's a lady that we work with, and she's a celebrity divorce attorney, and she had a website. I think hers was on Squarespace, and her design was amazing, but we couldn't get in and touch and feel all the things we needed to do to optimize it.
mm,
So our designers just reverse engineered that same design, but into WordPress. So it could be either or. It could be the design that needs a new platform, but you can keep the design. It could be that the design sucks, but the platform's okay. So you rebuild a new design on top of the same platform.
mm. Yeah, thank you again for that. I have a lot of podcast listeners and friends of mine on the podcast community. Now, what do you say to them? What type of optimization do you think that they should be having on their episodes? I mean, is it the naming conventions? Is it
Mm.
the tags, or is it links? What do you think drives SEO when it comes to podcast episodes?
So podcasts have a huge opportunity that most overlook. And it's what it is like, so the podcast format is audio.
Hmm,
Search engines can more easily understand text. So what you want to do is, when you publish your podcast episode and you have your player at the top of the episode, first of all, have every episode have an independent page.
mhm,
Don't have a giant wall with all of them on the same page, for two reasons. One, that's going to kill your page speed, because as the page load, it has to open the player and then the other player, and then the player again, and then the player again. And all of those players for each individual episode have a ton of code, which slows down the website.
mm,
The second problem is search engines can't understand the value of the independent episodes because they don't have independent pages.
mhm,
So make sure the episodes all have independent pages. And then once you have independent pages, transcribe them. So I'm going to give you one simpler answer and one more technical answer.
mhm,
So once you transcribe them, you can there's a lot of services, like the platform that my team uses is called Descript. And there's other ones that are a little more white glove, but are a lot more expensive, like Rev. So once you transcribe them, put that text on the page below the player, because now it becomes readable. But here's the second answer, the technical one. For those listeners that are more comfortable with technical updates, look up a process called schema. That's SCHEMA. And what you can do is you can basically wrap that text that you just pasted in schema code. Doesn't change it visually. You can do whatever you want visually, but it tells search engines more clearly what that text is.
mm,
So like if you were to run, like if you search Google schema validation, there's testing tools. So take and copy your URL to your episode in there now, and you'll see it doesn't detect that it's a podcast. It just says I found this page. Now,
mm,
once you add schema, then it's going to go, oh, Girish told me that not only this is text, but it's related to a podcast. And
mm,
he told me, here's the podcast publication date, here's the guest, here's the featured image. And in addition to that, this text that I'm looking at, he told me very clearly that it's a transcription of the audio file. So because you communicated that information to Google, it now trusts the content better. Therefore, it's likely to rank it higher. So you don't have, and there's ways to templatize this. So again, back to WordPress. Like if you're on WordPress, you can edit the template in a way that says every time an episode is published, automatically use the post title, use the podcast episode title as the title and schema. Use the WordPress publication date as the podcast publication date. Use the words on the page as a transcription. So you can front load this to code this one time, and then all future episodes now get the value of schema. Therefore, Google trusts all episodes and will rank them higher.
Now, well, this is a great opportunity for all the podcasters community to understand this thing here. Thank you again, Damon, for explaining that. You know, I just went to your website right before this recording, and I saw you're giving out free books also, your ebook. Can you explain about that, and why are you sending this for free? I mean, I'm pretty sure there's other ways to make it. So what are your thoughts on that, Damon?
Yeah, I published a book called Outrank about 2 years ago, and it's all these things we're talking about. So I found success in giving without expecting in return. So for the first few years in business, I just did it because that's who I am. But then I was able to realize that it's a superpower too. And so then I started being more intentional about it in the processes. And so for me, there's more value in giving away the book, educating my audience, and earning their trust and showcasing my expertise to build a better lead that understands the processes and what they're walking into and now trusts me in the judgment. So then they don't get in their own way when they reach out to me and we execute and we start doing SEO. So I could sell the book, but the value in the book for me is not monetizing the book. It's leveraging the book for expertise and credibility.
Yeah. Thank you again. I've been following your work for the longest time, and I understand exactly what you're saying. Thank you again, Damon, for that. You know, one last question, if you don't mind, Damon. You know, the Web 2 and the Web 3 that people are talking about, is SEO going to change a little when it comes to the Web 3 version of how we're going to think about the whole new change of blockchain and everything else? What are your thoughts on that?
But so my gut reaction is that the core concepts won't change. Now, the mediums in which you deliver them certainly might change. So what I mean by that is, we talked about these three core pillars of structure, content, and credibility. So when it comes to any other platform, or at least to today, any other historical evolution in search engines have just followed those same three core pillars. So I can give you some examples. So back in 2016, there was this big algorithm update that everybody deemed mobile-geddon. So like the end of the world because of the end of SEO as we know it, because now mobile results are taking precedence. But all that really was saying the majority of our audiences are moving to smaller devices with varying resolutions, so we need to be able to serve them better. So what is that? That's pillar number one, good site structure and usability and mobile friendliness. So then we jump ahead to a more current an ongoing algorithm update, which is like voice search. So like if we go pick up your phone and you like search something and it kicks it back in a voice, nobody on the other side recorded that answer in audio. What voice is doing is going, A, what websites can I find the fastest? So that's number one, site structure. B, who has the best answer to the solution that I can trust, which is pillar number two, content. And it's just delivering. So it's acquiring the answer in the same way we've always done. It's just outputting it in a different medium. So I imagine any examples that I've been exposed to so far, it's the same thing. It's like whatever is in 3.0 is looking for the answers. Well, the answers still reside on websites that it needs to access quickly that it trusts. So the concepts, as far as I've been exposed to so far, I don't think are going to change. It's just applying the same concepts to new mediums.
Yeah. Thank you again. And one last question. I know I said that before, but is metadata also going to be part of this whole new change, or what are your thought process? You think we're adding another search engine, search when it comes to metadata?
Like metadata as in data on files and images, or meta
As in
as
images,
in
right? Files and images. Yeah.
now so metadata on images and assets currently don't add a lot of value in they can in image searches,
Mm,
but we actually strip metadata
mm,
when we're optimizing a client's website. And the reason why is because it it improves the page speed by removing that. So like images specifically, so the listeners that might not be familiar with metadata, like if you have a photo, it could there could be embedded on that image. It could tell you the date that the photo was taken, the aperture speed of the camera, the latitude and longitude of the location in which the picture was taken. Or if it's an illustration, it might say it was created in Illustrator or Photoshop or Figma or whatever. And so that data exists on the image, but to the eye, we can't see it.
mm,
But it's still on the file, which adds to the file size, which adds to the page delay of which the image is on that page. So
mm,
we actually strip that data off when we go through and optimize a website to
mm,
improve the page speed,
mm.
because leaving it on there delays the page speed and it doesn't serve any purpose in accessing or sharing that data to a visitor. So it's like negative, disadvantages without any advantages. So we just strip it off.
Yeah, thank you again. And like during the week, I released a episode about audio files for metadata and how that's important. And today we're talking about the images when it comes to metadata.
hmm
Uh, and I think what you're saying is to strip away the metadata to make it more easier, run faster on the website. Is that correct?
Yeah, because when visitors go to a search engine and ask a question, they just want their problem solved, and metadata, it doesn't tend to solve the problems.
Of course, it makes it worse actually. From what you're explaining here, thank you again, Damon, for that. Now, before you leave today, do you have any last words to all my Back to Basic listeners and my viewers? And how was your journey on Back to Basics too? Before you leave today.
Well, let's just go back to the opening topic, which is keep it simple. I think entrepreneurs, we often overthink things, understandably. I'm not saying that it's not a natural kind of process that we go through, but where the value is picking a focus and then sticking to it. So simplistically, I would say whatever you want to start, and then don't stop. I'll give you an example with my agency. So I've been 15 years into just one thing, SEO, and I have a lot of other peers that have found success as well by juggling 10 things, but they're doing as much as we're doing the same volume or level of success with me doing one thing and them doing 10 things. And every time I have a conversation with any of them where I say, that's really cool that you're doing this other thing, I have these other things I've thought about too. Every single one of them says, don't do it. So
Mm.
I think there's a lot of value that we overlook in just keeping it simple.
Yeah, yeah, Damon, thank you again for coming on the show, and I'm definitely honored for you to be on my show and talk about SEO, even though that it's a three-letter word, or I should say abbreviations. But you know what? It's very important, and people should understand what SEO stands for and what it does in the back end versus just the user end. So thank you again for coming here and explaining that.
Yeah, I appreciate the opportunity, Girish, and thanks for listening, everybody.
Thank you. So, guys, we spoke with Damon today and we talked about the basics of SEO and how SEO changes our lives when we're trying to search something through voice, text, images, or even for that matter, even websites. So, as usual, as always, there is a quote of the day from Back to Basics, and hopefully, Damon will like this quote of the day. The quote is: best way to sell something, don't sell anything. Earn the awareness, respect, and trust of those who might buy. Now, think about what he just said. He's not selling the book, he's giving the book away. So it's give, right? And that's what he's just trying to do. Make awareness, share the education, and that's what we're trying to do on this show. As usual, as always, what do we always say at the end of the episode? Everything in life goes back to basics, and that's what we did today, guys. Guys, take care. God bless. Keep on commenting on all my episodes because it helps me to understand week by week, month by month, that you guys are listening and supporting me all the way through. And there's three things, including this episode and every episode, makes it hit for me, that is, which is the content, the guest, and definitely the host. Guys, take care, God bless, and I will see you next time on Back to Basics.
Next week's episode on Back to Basics.
Still there, and they do give it for whatever reason. I think it's still a mindset as to if it is in my hand, I'm going to go and call you. But I think the Gen Ys and Gen Zs are thinking, and don't get me wrong, guys. I mean, we're, making notes and exchanging notes here. So if I'm wrong, please do comment my episode and let me know that I'm wrong, or tell me what's right to think about. But what I'm about to say is Gen Ys and Gen Zs, they think a little more digital.